Hello, and welcome to the Plan Your Career event, an event for students interested by a career in the public service of Canada. My name is Carl Allery. I am a student and administrative compensation officer at the Privy Council office, and I will be your moderator for today. Today, I am speaking to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin-Anishinaabe Nation. You might know it today as the National Capital Region. I encourage you in turn to think about the presence of Indigenous peoples past and present who call these lands home. We have a great presentation and valuable information to share with you today. But before, please note that cameras and microphone are deactivated. Today's event will be held in English and be recorded and made available for viewings afterwards. For the French session that occurred this morning, we encourage you to go see the recording once it is available. During the event, we invite you to use the question and answer function to ask any and all of your questions. Finally, to improve your viewing experience, we encourage you to disconnect from the VPN if possible. If you are experiencing technical problems, it is recommended that you relaunch the webcast link that has been provided to you. Today's theme revolves around planning your career. Please note that all of the content of this presentation can be assessed and accessed on the GC Students Wiki page. Now I would first like to introduce my colleagues, Priyanka and Audrey-Anne, both co-chairs of the GC Students Network, a group under the Federal Youth Network dedicated to provide students a stimulating work experience in the Government of Canada. Hello, colleagues. I'd like to introduce you, and I'll let you actually introduce yourselves by telling us a bit about you.
Thank you, Carl. Like Carl said, my name is Priyanka Sharma. My pronouns are elle, she, her. I am joining you today from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I am an HR advisor with Employment and Social Development Canada, and I do work on the student retention, advancement, and recruitment file with ESDC. I'm also the co-chair of GC Students. I'm here today to present this wonderful information to you from my experience as a student and now as an HR advisor to really connect with all of you on that level, because I was once a student. I once worked as a student with the public service and then had wonderful opportunities to get to where I'm at today. So I'm hoping that today's information will help you plan your career and encourage you to join the federal public service.
Hi everyone, my name is Audrey-Anne Racine. My pronouns are elle, she, her. I'm also joining you from the National Capital, which is on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I'm here practicing my second language. That's one of the best things in my current experience and my experience working for the Government of Canada, being able to practice my second language. I'm also an HR advisor, so a human resources advisor at Employment and Social Development Canada. I'm also a student doing a master degree. It is my last semester, but I'm also the co-chair of GC Student, and I'm super happy to be here with us today. With you today. Oh boy, I said it was my second language.
Thank you. And we have also behind the scenes today our wonderful Alexa, our communications products manager, who manages our technology for today and is making this event possible. Thank you, Alexa.
Thank you, Carl. So yeah, my name is Alexia Kelly, and I am the project officer at the Federal Youth Network. But I love the GC Students Network. I was also a student myself through FSWEP. So it's always a pleasure and honor to support all the events and activities. So thank you.
Thank you to you all. Just before we start, I want to welcome you, our new and returning students. Seeing that you're taking part in these events is hugely motivating for us. I think we're almost at 180 now. That's fantastic. So last time we saw each other, it was in February, where we discussed a diverse work experience in the government, available benefits to students, and how to begin a conversation about student bridging. But if you're like me and you forgot some of these details, just go check out our wiki page. You can scan the QR code right there, right now on the screen, and you'll be able to access all of this information. Our presentation plan for today will first discuss about job groups and levels, then move on to types of employment and processes in the Government of Canada. And third, we'll find a job on GC Jobs. We'll have a special invitee with us today for that. And then we'll have additional resources to share with you, some announcements, and obviously our live questions and answers period where you get to ask all of your questions. Before we begin, I want to launch a poll with you. On a scale of 1 to 5, what is your level of understanding about the topics on planning your career within the Government of Canada as of right now? So before this presentation even begins, how would you rate yourself? All right, let's look at the results. So I'd say most people are in between 2 and 3, although we have quite a considerable amount of people that do not know much. Do not fear, this presentation will really give you a solid base to understand how to plan your career effectively in the Government of Canada. So up first on our agenda, job groups and levels. Our human resources advisors and co-chairs will give us the ABCs of what they are and why they are important to us. Priyanka?
Thanks, Carl. Okay, so it's one of the most fundamental pieces for you to know when starting to plan your career with the Federal Public Service. I do want to highlight that there are probably some people on this presentation that don't currently work for the Federal Public Service. And if you're a student or just somebody who's looking to pursue a career with the Government of Canada, this information still is extremely important to help you understand and make a better educated decision on what path you should be taking with the Federal Public Service. So an occupational group really defines the group that you fall under with the Government of Canada. Within the public service, you'll a lot of the time see on job postings that there'll be a 2-letter abbreviation, something like AS or PE or CS. And what that does is it classifies you within a group of individuals or a group that represents a specific area in which you would be working in. So there are a few ways that you could figure out what your occupational group is. The first one is a tool that's available to you. You can use the link in the chat to kind of play with it, but we will be providing an example on how to use this tool. It's the Occupational Groups for the Public Service website. On this website, you'll see all of the groups, all of the classifications, and you'll also be able to find what the qualification standards are for those specific groups and classifications, the job evaluation standards. So we'll talk a little bit about essential qualifications. So you'll be able to find all the information necessary to see if you meet the criteria of that group or classification. If you're currently a student and you're interested in something, it's a great tool to see what classes you should be taking, maybe what degree you should be taking if you're not, you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your career. So that's one of the tools that you could use. A second tool that you could use to figure out your occupational group or maybe something close to what you might want to do with your career is to go and look at job advertisements on GC Jobs. This is a great way to look at all the job postings that are available externally for all of those who don't currently work for the government, and there's opportunities for those who are internal who currently work for the government that can see internal job postings. But you can go on there, you can do a little bit of research, search for job titles that you might be interested in, read what is required for those classifications or occupational groups. So those, you can see those 2 letters, 2 or 3 letters sometimes. Read what's required of you, read what the essential qualifications are, and determine and see, do I meet the educational requirements? Do I have experience in what they're looking for? But those are two key ways that you can find your occupational group. For those of you who do work currently as a student in the government, or you're currently an employee with the government, you have a few other ways you can do some research. One is asking your colleagues or your supervisor or manager to see what professional group you fall under. The second is using the GC directory. These are internal tools, so you're only going to be able to access them if you currently work as a student or an employee for the Government of Canada. The next step is to understand your level. So oftentimes, well, all the time, you will see the 2 digits or three-letter abbreviation, you'll see a dash, and then you'll see numbers that follow. So for example, you might see something that is like AS-01 or AS-02, and that signifies the level of which you would fall under for that classification. So to determine your level, one of the best ways to do that is to look at the job advertisements. As a student or somebody who's starting off in the federal public service, you want to look at the beginning levels, so AS level 1 or CS level 1, so look for level 1, and look at the essential qualifications. That's what gets evaluated. You'll see that there's a few requirements that you need to meet in order to qualify for those positions. So what the recommendation would be is to read through the job advertisement, look at the essential qualifications that are required, do a little bit of research on the occupational groups, and see if you can mark off each one of those essential qualifications, provide examples, and say, yes, I'm capable of meeting all of the essential qualifications for this level 1 position. Let me check to see if I qualify for a level 2. You work your way up and see, what jobs you would qualify for and what you wouldn't. Keeping in mind that when you're making a decision like this, you want to make sure you're setting yourself up and applying for positions that you can perform in, you can learn in. You're not applying too high up right away, right after your studies at a level 4 or level 5 position. You want to make sure that you meet those qualifications and you can perform to those abilities. So researching this through GC Jobs or the occupational groups tool that we're going to share with you is really important to understand what your level is. So now you know what your group is and what your level is. And for the workers and employees of the Government of Canada, you have the ability to ask your colleagues, your supervisor, your manager. They can help you understand what your level is. Like I had mentioned, as an internal worker and employee, you have access to internal job postings. So again, you can go in and see internal job postings that provide you with information on what the essential qualifications are. You can also search for archived job postings to see what previous job postings had listed in their essential qualifications. There's also the ability to do filtered classification and level for those who are internal on jobs.gc.ca, but we will have someone really special from the Public Service Commission who will share information about that.
Excellent. Now it's time for a second poll. Do you guys know the occupational group in which you want to start your career in? If so, I'd invite you to answer the poll number 2 question and just write down the 2-letter abbreviation that you want to start in. Excellent. And let's share the results. We have a lot of different answers here. We have some PMs, some ASs, some ECs as well. So we have a really diverse audience. That is great to see. Excellent. So now that we know our groups and levels in the Public Service of Canada, let's turn our attention to the different employment types and processes that there is. Right. So a major question we get asked is, how do I get a job with
the government of Canada, what is the steps required so that I can become an employee of the government of Canada? Well, this infographic gives you a good idea of how to get your foot in the door. So if you're currently a student, a part-time worker, a casual worker, you're considered a worker of the government of Canada. The way you enter to become an employee of the public service is through a fixed contract or an indeterminate contract. So a fixed contract will have an end date, an indeterminate contract will have no end date. Once you have entered into the government of Canada as an employee, you have opportunities within your department or within other departments. So opportunities in the department, you can have something called a deployment, which means you are going from the same level to the same level, but just in a different job. A promotion, which means you're going from, let's say, an AS1 to an AS2, and that can be within your department. Both of those opportunities are available in other departments as well. So you could deploy from level to level. So you're just staying in the same level from one department to another department. You can also have a promotion from one department to another department. There are other things that are temporary employment, so things like an assignment, an acting. An assignment is when you work in your department on a special project or a special piece that is for a specific period of time. And acting is when you might have a specified period in which you're acting at a higher level. So maybe you're acting as an AS2 for a specific period of time. And then in other departments, you have secondments, which are projects you would complete in another department for a specified period of time. So these are a few opportunities in the employment types that you would see after you've come into the government as an employee. So keeping those in mind, we'll go to the next slide. So just to have the words on the page without the infographic, the Government of Canada workers classify as student employment or part-time workers or casual employment. Like I'd mentioned, to become a public servant, you have to look at two options, determinate contracts or indeterminate contracts. And then once you are a public servant and you're an employee, you will have multiple opportunities to help you grow in your career, advance and get experiences in different areas. So just keeping in mind to look out for opportunities such as these for employment types. We'll move on to, I will let Carl.
All right, let's see if we understood you correctly, Priyanka. We have a little quiz question for our students. If you have a student job within the Government of Canada, so you're a student worker, are you eligible for enacting? Yes or no? I'll give you 1 second to answer this, and Priyanka will give us the answer. All right, so we have 18% that said yes and 82% that said no. Priyanka?
So the correct answer is no. As a student, you cannot get an acting position. And the reason is because an acting position is something that's only available for employees, so internal employees. So you would have had to come into the government using those two methods that we mentioned, either a fixed contract or an indeterminate contract, then you would be eligible for an acting position. But that's not to say that as a student, a part-time worker, or a casual worker, you can't gain experiences. So what I'm trying to say is that as a student or somebody who's currently a worker with the Government of Canada, if you've been with your team or within a certain area for some time, there's no harm in having a conversation with your hiring manager or your supervisor to see how you can improve your skill set, to prepare you for when you do make that move to become an employee. And a way to do that is to make sure you're doing your research, make sure you're looking out for job postings on jobs.gc.ca, do research on occupational groups, the level you currently fall under, to make sure you're meeting the requirements, and then asking your hiring manager or supervisor for more work or other work that could help you grow and build your skill set. So that's not to say you can't gain experiences, but with an acting, you do have to be an employee.
Thank you, Priyanka.
Okay, so now that we know employment types, the next thing to know is appointment processes. This iceberg is a great way to visualize what appointment processes are available and, have a good visual understanding. So it's an iceberg, and there's a top of the iceberg, and then there's the part under the water, which is not visible. It's still part of the iceberg, but you can't see it. So we have the jobs that are advertised jobs. So those are visible, the top of the iceberg. You have internal advertised processes and external advertised processes. And then under the water, you have unadvertised jobs. So things you would find through word of mouth, through networking. So you have external non-advertised processes, and in brackets, you can see it says student bridging, which I know a lot of you have questions about. And then there's internal non-advertised processes. We also have the sun shining on one side of the iceberg and shadow on the other side of the iceberg. So you can see that for an external advertised process, everybody can see them. This is something that is advertised on jobs.gc.ca. It's available to anyone, but it's always key to look at who's eligible to apply. So that's something that you have to look at every time you look at a job posting. That applies to internal advertised processes. So like I'd mentioned, there's a section on GC Jobs. For those of you who currently work with the Government of Canada, you might see a tab that says internal jobs. And those are things that only employees of or workers of the government can see on jobs.gc.ca. So it's visible, but it's only visible to public servants. We now have external, so that's the top part. Let's go to the next slide so I can help explain a little bit better. So students are not considered to be members of the public service. You're considered to be workers. So like I said, external advertised positions are visible to everyone. Internal advertised positions are only visible to people who belong to the public service. So students are sometimes included in that. So you might be able to look at who's eligible to apply, and it might say students there. So you could potentially apply to positions like that. There are non-advertised job postings. So these job postings are not posted anywhere. You have to find them through networking. You have to find them through word of mouth. So having discussions with your manager, which brings me to the external non-advertised opportunity, which is for mostly student bridging. So you'll often find those types of positions through conversations with your hiring manager, your supervisor, other hiring managers. It's the best way to find a position like this. So you want to make sure that if you are currently a student and you're looking for a student bridging opportunity, you are networking, you are making those connections. And of course, there's the non-advertised internal processes. So those are not seen by anybody, but you do need to find those through your connections, through networking and making yourself visible. So this is what employment processes are. This is to give you a good understanding of how things tie together. So you now know employment types, and now you know appointment processes. We'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so I think I've touched on this a little bit, but we'll go over finding a job by process. So external advertised appointment processes are available on jobs.gc.ca. That's something that you can set up your notifications for. It's a great way to keep in touch with what job opportunities pop up and are available, and that something might come up that are super interesting to you that you could potentially apply for an external non-advertised appointment process. So for student bridging, like I mentioned, networking. So events like we have this afternoon, we have a networking event. Go network, make connections, build your community. We talk about that in our previous presentation as well. We also talk about becoming members of Facebook groups. So you can find tons of Facebook groups. A lot of them usually end with GOC-informal. So that will be your indication that it is an informal Facebook group for potential opportunities within the government. For workers and employees of the GOC, you can also consider, you can also consider internal advertised appointment processes. So again, you can review, you can set up notifications on jobs.gc.ca, but it is crucial that you look at who's eligible to apply for those, specifically for students, because not all opportunities that are internal advertised are for students. There's also external non-advertised appointment processes that are done where you can do research on the GC directory to expand your network, or you can go on tools like Career Marketplace, GC Connect. So again, these tools are only available internally if you are a worker or employee of the Government of Canada. Just a little bit for those of you who currently work for the government, there are a few ways that you can make yourself more visible, bring yourself to have more opportunities, and that's by looking for inventories that are available at different departments. So I do want to make a note that these opportunities do not guarantee you a job, but it does help you expand your opportunities and your visibility within the Government of Canada. We have the QR code here that will take you to our GC Students Wiki page, and you'll see there's a list of them. We have one at ESDC, there's one at IRCC, I believe. So you can go ahead, add your name to those if you're eligible. So again, these are inventories that are only available for students who currently work with the Government of Canada. So if you're looking for student bridging opportunities, this is the time to add your name to inventories. Of course, making sure you're having conversation with your supervisor or hiring manager. Okay, we also, like I had mentioned, there are a list of Facebook groups that you can access on our GC Students Wiki page. We have our own Facebook group, which I believe we have around 1,300 people in that Facebook group already. So if you want to become a member of that, you will be provided a link in the chat or a QR code a little later on in the presentation, but you can go ahead and scan it and you can see a list of all the Facebook groups that are currently available that you can join. You can network in, you can find opportunities. You can, maybe write a post about yourself if that's something that's available within that group, but it's a great way to start your networking process.
Thank you so much, Priyanka, for this information. Really, really informative and useful, at least for me. I'm sure for a lot of people as well. We are now on to our third segment of this presentation, where we will learn about how to find a job, more specifically on GC Jobs. For this part, we are welcoming a special guest, Zainab Tanir, a human resources advisor from the Public Service Commission. Zainab, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you to the hosts, and thanks everyone for joining and taking time out of your day to listen to us. So I'll start with the student recruitment programs. The most well-known one, I'm sure most of you have heard of it, the FSWEP program, so the Federal Student Work Experience Program. In order to be eligible, you need to be considered full-time with your school, university, college, etc. And you must be returning to full-time studies within the next academic year. And one that isn't here, but usually all of you meet, is to have the minimum age to work in your province. We are now starting to promote FSWEP in high school, so it could be a thing. FSWEP is one of the easiest ways to get bridged into the federal government, as you all may have already heard. And it gives you, it's really made for students. So hiring managers are fully aware that when they are asking for students through this program, that your availabilities, for example, when you're studying, could be as low as 5 hours a week, for example. And there are also opportunities during for example, the summertime full-time if you're available and interested. You'll also see that the FSWEP program is very accessible. It takes, I would say, a maximum of 15 minutes to fill out. It'll take you to a form that you'll fill out, and you'll attach your resume, and you have an opportunity for your profile to be shared with a hiring manager. The way it works is when a hiring manager submits an FSWEP request, it means that they are looking to hire a student, and should it's a randomized selection. So should your criteria meet what the hiring manager is looking for, you'll receive a notification saying that your profile has been shared. And from there, the hiring manager will reach out to you, or whoever's helping the hiring manager, and you might be asked to for an interview or asked throughout the process. So it's a very good way. There are also other programs available to you, but of course, FSWEP is one of the main big ones. You have the Research Affiliate Program. Again, it's the same criteria, being considered a full-time student and returning to full-time studies, but also if you have a component in your program that's related to research. It doesn't have to be your full program, even if it's a couple of programs. I would still, if it's something that interests you, and still encourage you to take a look. Then you have the co-op internship programs. You also must be a full-time student, and also it has to be part of your program that you in order to graduate, you need to do an internship. And if you would like more information, the best way is through your educational institution. They already have all the opportunities within the government for internships. So you would inquire through your educational institution. Last but not least, the specialized recruitment programs. They used to be called targeted recruitment programs, but we changed the name because targeted is not as nice. The best example I can give you is, for example, like student guides at the Governor General, for example. So when, like, for example, the Governor General, they have very specific, like they want to hire students, but they have very specific needs. So that's why we call it a specialized recruitment program. Most of them are throughout like summer programs. So if you're interested in a very cool opportunity during the summer, something very fun or very different, I would really encourage you to take a look there. They're not, as opposed to FSWEP that is open all year long, specialized recruitment programs come and go. But usually they'll be posted starting maybe around December, January for the summer season. So if you're looking for summer jobs, the sooner the better. Also, so graduate recruitment programs. Once you've graduated, we have the post-secondary recruitment. I know it says post-secondary in the title, but it doesn't only mean that it's for college or only for university level, etc. As long as you're about to graduate, or if you've graduated, even there's no limit. So even if you've graduated 2-3 years ago, you can still take a look. Usually the campaigns, I would say between September and December, it's the best time to go take a look. Also, the recruitment of policy leaders. This one is if you've the requirements are more if you've studied maybe more towards the master's level, and you're interested in policy, human rights, etc. It would be really nice for you to check that out. Also, the virtual door to talent for persons with disabilities. You have the Indigenous Career Pathways and other specialized recruitment initiatives that you can, that I would say come and go throughout. I'll touch a bit on those later. So if you Visit GC Jobs. If you already have an FSWEP account, you can log into GC Jobs with the same username and password. I really recommend you, even if you guys are still students, I highly recommend that you start, like Priyanka was mentioning, taking a look at what the different requirements are, the experiences, etc. Also, like she said, eligibility criteria, area of selection. So sometimes you can get screened out for something as simple as your place of residence. So make sure before you spend time answering the screening questions and applying that you meet the eligibility criteria, the area of selection, and any essential qualification for the position. So the thing that I really wanted to mention is we have some programs for Indigenous student employment opportunities, as well as employment opportunities for students with disabilities. But in order to qualify for those programs, you need to be first hired through FSWEP. So if that is your case, I really wanted to mention that unfortunately, the FSWEP program doesn't communicate necessarily. So even if you, in your FSWEP account, you self-identified as Indigenous or as having a disability, in order to be eligible for those programs, you need to fill out a specific form for that. So which would give you access to, for example, trainings, mentoring programs, events, support services, like so many different, like especially like mentoring programs are very useful, and they really help even for career advancement. Next slide. So like I was saying, to register for those two programs for students with disabilities or Indigenous students, there is a separate form. So that's something that is not always repeated, but if that's your case and you were hired through FSWEP, I strongly recommend that you fill out your form and self-declare if that's your situation.
Thank you so much, Zainab. I'm always amazed by the diversity of programming that the Public Service Commission has. It's incredible. So I mean, there's really something for everybody, right? So thank you so much. I hope you stay on later on to answer some of our questions during the Q&A period. Now we're going to move on to some additional resources. So we know about our groups and levels, the types of employment processes, the different kind of recruitment programs offered in the federal public service, but there's also so much more that we could learn. And Audrey-Anne will share with us some of these additional resources.
The first thing that we would like to make sure you understand correctly is really the second language evaluation. The first thing to know is that the language of the position must be met at the time of the appointment. So you'll see in a job poster that they will required as essential qualification a second language profile. So you can see English essential, French essential, or bilingual. There is different level of second language. The first one will be A, so it's a beginner level. Then you have B, and the term intermediate level. You can have C, advanced level. If you're not able to get the first level, which is A, you'll have an X, so the performance does not meet the minimum requirement. And if you're completely bilingual, you will have the exemption. So if you look at the job poster, you will see the second language evaluation and the requirement for the job as you'll see three letters. The order of the letters are for the writing evaluation, the reading, writing, and then the oral. So let's say in a job poster, you'll see CBC, What that means is that the reading you'll need to have, you'll need to get the advanced. My God, I'm practicing my second language and I'm doing a speech on second language. Okay, you'll need to have for the reading the advanced the C level, so to be like an expert in the reading. Then the writing you'll need to get B, which is in the intermediate. Oh my God, I'm mixing and indeterminate and intermediate, but intermediate level. And then for the oral you'll need to have the level C, which is advanced level. So same thing, if you see BBB, it will be reading, writing, oral, all the intermediate level. If you want to be prepared before doing the real evaluation, you can do the self-assessment test. So you can test to see what is your level and really be able to practice to get your C level, B level in order to pass the second language evaluation. Once you'll have your official results, so that's really when you are in a process, you will have an appointment or an evaluation, the real evaluation. Make sure to keep a copy of your official results so you can share the proof with other hiring manager to prove that you have the second language requirement for your positions.
That's so great. Thank you, Audrey-Anne, for sharing all that information about second languages. And I just want to put a shout out there that it's hard sometimes. It's you need to step out of your comfort zone when you are speaking your second language to so many people and you're not comfortable, but it's a great way to raise your confidence and build your skill to be able to speak your second language. So thank you, Audrey-Anne, for taking the initiative to do that. There's so many other ways that you can learn. There's so many resources that you can find to help continue your learning. GC Students is a network that's under the Federal Youth Network. We're really there to support the students within the Government of Canada, but also at the same time, have these resources available for all of you. So the Federal Youth Network has career resources to help with your career development. They do virtual learning series, and I know that there's one coming up in April on compensation. So it's about pay, pension, classification, so you can learn a little bit more about that. I know we spoke a tiny bit about classification and occupational groups at the beginning, but there's just so much more to know. So being in touch with the Federal Youth Network in their virtual learning series can be extremely helpful for your career growth, for your knowledge. They also do career boot camp, which is something that they usually do at the end of January. We were so lucky to be a part of the career boot camp this year. They shared so much insightful information. We got to do a presentation on how to better build your resume, how to build a standout resume. So that's something that we got to experience and have conversations with youth in the federal public service or those who aspire to be in the federal public service. So really a great way of learning as well. The Federal Youth Network has a YouTube channel, so they do record their online sessions, and that's something that you can watch on their YouTube channel. It's honestly something that you can listen to like a podcast, learn the information that people have to share. It's just a great tool, and I use it all the time to get a lot of information on how to grow and develop in my career as well. For those of you who are currently working in the government, there is also a course that is called Basics of Staffing in the Public Service. Great way to have a generalized understanding of staffing, and it's available to you on the Canada School of Public Service website. So we'll be sharing those links with you as well. And now, before we get into our announcements, I want to just give a small summary to say, when you're looking for a job, don't put all your eggs in one basket. We talked about so many different ways that you can network. Zainab has shared so many ways for student recruitment. So if you are currently looking for a position, you have the opportunity potentially, if you meet if you meet the requirements, you have things like FSWEP, Co-op, the Research Affiliate Program. For those of you who are looking for jobs after your studies, there are Facebook groups that you can join. There is GC Jobs where you can set up notifications. For those of you who are currently working with the government, you have inventories, you have the GC directory, so you can network. But networking and making sure you're putting your opportunities in as many places as possible, again, increasing your visibility within this community, you are giving yourself more ways to find opportunities to grow in your career. So just a small tip, if you want to take something away from this presentation, it's don't put all your eggs in one basket. Be sure to use all the networking resources that we're sharing with you and all the other information that we're sharing with you.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. Let's move on to a last poll question of the day. So at the beginning, we asked you your level of understanding. We're asking this again. So on a scale of 1 to 5, what is your level of understanding now about the subjects of planning your career within the Government of Canada? 5 being the highest level of understanding. I see that this is increasing already. I'll show you the results in just a few seconds. All right. So now most people would say they're in between 3 and 4 out of 5, which is awesome. I mean, there's obviously so much more we could learn, but I think with this, you're starting with a great foundation of how it is to build your career in the public service, and you're starting off with the right tools. A few announcements. Perhaps, Priyanka, you would like to make a few announcements before we move on to the Q&A session?
Absolutely. So just like all of you did in the poll, we know that some of you have gained some knowledge from it, but we would love to hear from you. We would like your feedback so that we can improve our presentations, provide you with the necessary information. So please do take a moment to fill out the feedback form. You can scan the QR code or click on the link in the chat. But it's really beneficial for us to know if this was helpful information and what we can improve for the next time. Like I had mentioned during the time I was talking about Facebook groups, GC Students does have a Facebook group that is available to you. We have almost, I believe, 1,300 people who are a part of this group. It's a great way to network, to see student job opportunities, potential jobs after you study. So you can scan the QR code on your screen or click on the link in the chat, and you can request to join, and someone will accept your request within the next few weeks. We also have a GC Students monthly newsletter. This is something that provides you a little bit of insight on what's going on with the federal public service, what student opportunities and initiatives are going on. A great way to stay in touch with the events that are happening. So we will share information about the Federal Youth Network events such as this one through GC Students, and other events that might be relevant to you if you are an aspiring future public servant. So we do encourage you to stay in touch through the GC Students monthly newsletter. It's a great way to know what to sign up for, where to find the links, and all the information that's new and upcoming. And lastly, we have a bunch of social media that you can follow us on. Again, it's just a great way to stay in touch with the events that are happening throughout the year. We post on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. So all of these are great opportunities to just stay aware, be connected, build your network so that you're a part of this community and you can take advantage of all the resources that we're putting out there for you to help you grow in your career.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Priyanka. It is now time to move on to the question period. We are inviting you to submit your questions using the Q&A function on the Zoom app. Priyanka, would you start us off by giving us an example how to find your occupational group?
Absolutely. I'm just going to share my screen here. So we talked about a tool, and can someone confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So we talked about a tool called occupational groups for the public service. And this is where you can do your research and try to see what occupational groups are available that might be relevant to you. So let's take an example and say I'm studying photography. I'm going to go ahead and look at this filter items here and put my cursor in the search box and write down photography. And I can right away see that there's a classification under the group technical services. The classification is PY. And what I can see here is you can see the job evaluation standards, the qualification standards, and just so much more information that can help you make a more informed decision on what you want to do for your career. So let's take another example and say I want to do something in human resources. So that's something that I work in. I know my group is HM, but my classification is PE. So I can see right here, personal administration. I can see the job evaluation standards and the qualification standards. So I'm going to go ahead and click yes to that because I want to see the qualification standards. And what that's going to do, it's going to bring me to this page here, where actually, if you scroll through, you'll see that all of the classifications are there. So once you're on this page, another way to kind of do a quick search if you're a student and currently, deciding on what you want to do with your career or trying to get some ideas on what's available to you, you can do a Control F and search by your degree. So in this page, it gives you all of the education requirements for each classification. So for example, if I'm studying psychology and I want to know what's available to me in psychology, I can go ahead and type that in, and I can already see for a PE classification, I do require a graduation with a degree from a recognized post-secondary institution in one of the following, and it is psychology is written there. So I know that I could potentially be eligible if I do complete a psychology degree for a personal administration classification. I can just go ahead and search down and see what the other opportunities are. And I think this is a great way to help you determine what works best for you in your career. Specifically, if you're a student and don't know what you want to do yet, this is a great way to research and learn about the opportunities, because the federal public service has so many different branches, so many different opportunities in terms of career, and there's just so much room for career development and career growth. So having the knowledge of what's available to you is just going to benefit you when you are ready to make those decisions on what you want to do next in your career, and to help you have those conversations with your supervisor or your manager. So this is just a quick tool on what you can do. I will stop sharing my screen because we will share that link with you, and you can go around and play with it and see what works best for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Priyanka. Audrey-Anne, Zainab, feel free to join in and jump in at any point in the conversation. We're going to move on to some of the other questions we received in the Q&A function. So the first one is, I'm currently applying to Bridging Pools, and they ask for current occupational group and level. However, I'm an FSUP student, and my letter of offer does not state an occupational group. Am I allowed classifying myself, or does it have to be through my manager? Priyanka, perhaps you have some insight on this one?
I can kind of get started on this one, but I do want to invite Zainab and Audrey-Anne to help me answer this question as well. So I would recommend having a conversation with your manager to see what occupational group and level you are falling under, because as a student, sometimes on your letter of offer, you won't see a classification, but within the system, you will probably fall under a certain category, and your hiring manager would know that information. Audrey-Anne, do you have anything to add on that?
I know at CSDC, when the hiring manager is sending an hiring request for a student, they need to select a predominant predominant group for the student. So maybe to double check with your manager, also to check with your colleagues. Most part of the time, student will do AS job, so administrative support. Cal is in this situation. You can definitely ask your manager. They'll be the best to answer this question.
Absolutely, and that was my case, right? Because I did not have a classification on my letter of offer, but I asked around my colleagues and my supervisor manager, and I figured out that it was in the AS group. Thank you so much for the question. Next question. What are some tips for students trying to find their first job in the government of Canada? What skills and experiences are in demand?
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and answer that question, and please feel free to jump in if you have any other tips and tricks. So first of all, if you've never worked for the government before and you're looking for student opportunities, Zainab had touched on a few Public Service Commission initiatives that you can apply for. So one was the Federal Student Work Experience Program. That's the most common one that you can apply for. Just make sure you're looking at the eligibility requirements and that you meet them. Once you submit your application there, you'll see within the application form, there's a spot for you to see what your experiences are, what you're interested in, so that you can have that information in your profile. In terms of skill set, this is where I encourage you to do research. So for example, if you are looking to be in the computer science field, I'd recommend you go and look for CS related opportunities on jobs.gc.ca and look at the job postings that are available, because that will give you a good idea of what the essential qualifications are for that position, and you can cater your resume to match those essential qualifications so that the hiring manager is aware that you have that experience or you're currently studying in that field, so that you're matching the skills that they're looking for. And that's really how you're going to find that information, is really by doing the research on the job postings that are already available. Keeping in mind, every job has its own essential qualifications. So every job is different. There's definitely skills that everyone requires for each job, but you really need to know specific to your job what they're looking for and try to cater it based on that, based on your student experience, what you do in school, and maybe some other work experience you might have had. So that's my answer for the skill set. And of course, Zainab had touched on co-op and the research affiliate program. Again, those are all things that you should just look to see if you are eligible for those programs, because those are the other ways that you can make your way into the government as a student.
Thank you, Priyanka. Zainab, would you like to touch on perhaps some of the specific requirements for these specialized recruitment programs? I know sometimes there are specific criteria they're looking for.
The only thing I would add is sometimes there are like behavioral competencies that I would recommend maybe preparing yourselves with examples. Like, for example, like how would you say that you're a good team player, for example? Like already most of the time in interviews, you get these questions, and especially for entry-level jobs or your first job at the government, they will train you for the specific skill set. But a lot of hiring managers are looking to see that, for example, you're organized, or you're willing to learn, or that you're a good team player. So I would definitely do some research, like Priyanka said.
Excellent. Thank you so much. The next question is about classification. Now, we're not classification experts, but we'll try to answer this as much as we can. How to determine which groups and levels are equivalent or similar to each other as it relates to lateral movements? Would any of you know?
I think it's usually by salary, if I'm not mistaken. For example, I've switched from AS to PE, and I think it's by salary. Correct me if I'm wrong, Priyanka.
No worries at all. That's one way, but I think another key way of looking at potential lateral, so lateral movements would be a deployment. another way to see if you can move laterally like that is through the essential qualifications. So looking at the tool that I had mentioned earlier, you can see what the essential qualifications are for an AS and what the essential qualifications are for a PE, determine what the levels are, and see where you meet that. But again, that's something, we are not classification experts. I can't tell you which ones move laterally. It is possible to move laterally from one classification to another. It happens. It's happened to Zainab, like she said, it's happened to me. But again, that was a conversation I had with my hiring manager, who was able to talk to the experts and the subject matter experts on this topic so that they could get the full information on if I meet the essential qualifications for the position I was going to deploy in a different classification. The other form of deployment is really just moving from, for example, an AS1 to another AS1. So that is also a deployment. It does not mean you have to change classifications. You are just moving laterally. I hope that answers the question, but if you do have more questions on that, and you're currently working with the government, I would highly recommend talking to your supervisor or hiring manager to understand better.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Priyanka. We'll stay with you, Priyanka, for another question. If you have worked for 3 consecutive terms, not indeterminates, I would assume here as an FSWEP student, will you be eligible for an indeterminate contract? And I believe the answer is not necessarily, but could you explore that further with us?
For sure. So if you're a student currently and you've worked for 3 consecutive terms, you have to network and find opportunities that are indeterminate. So student bridging is the way you would find an indeterminate contract, potentially. It depends on the type of job that's available. And again, you have to do your research, you have to network, you have to see what the job posting is that is available. There are 2 ways that you can enter the government. It's through a determinate contract or an indeterminate contract. So if you're currently a student, you would want to look for opportunities where you can get bridged in, whether it's through a determinate contract or an indeterminate contract. And you can do that through networking, talking to your hiring manager, and look for student bridging opportunities through that. So just because you've worked 3 consecutive terms as a student, you are not guaranteed to get an indeterminate position. You still have to network, apply, look for those opportunities, make sure you're eligible for those opportunities, and check to see the type of employment it is in order to see if it's something that you can get. Audrey-Anne, please jump in.
I just want to make sure we are answering the question, but I think the person is saying that they have 3 terms, so determinate contract, and I know there is something about 3 years on a determinate contract that you can have your indeterminate position. We are not staffing advisors. I know there is something around that. I will try to do my best to find the information, but let's go. We'll look in the different laws and different directives to make sure we are answering well your question.
Zainab,
Exactly.
would you like to jump in?
Yes, I think I know what Audrey-Anne is referring to. It's usually if you have 3 consecutive, I don't think it applies to students, since it has to be 3 one-year terms without a break in service, that you automatically fall as indeterminate. So it's very specific. I think you have to have 3 terms with the same classification and without a break, if I'm not mistaken, but we will confirm, like Audrey-Anne mentioned.
Yeah, it seems like a very specific instance, right?
I think it's a very good way to get the 2 different opinions, one on the student side of it, and then one on if you are actually talking about a term employment. So like we had mentioned earlier. So
exactly. Thank you so much for this question. Moving on, perhaps staying with you, Zainab, if you have a disability, how do you apply for jobs with employment equity? Do you have to provide a medical documentation regarding your disability?
Sorry, I had trouble unmuting. So absolutely not. You will, it's not a pre-requirement to provide any type of a medical note. It is possible, but I would say it's not the majority of the time. When you self-declare or self-identify as having a disability, it doesn't, you don't need to specify what your disability is. All you need to do is reach out. Usually you'll see on posters if there'll always be a contact name to reach out if you've applied to a specific poster. And all they'll ask you is what your limitations are, like what do you need accommodations with. And you would be surprised with how many different types of accommodations there are. So it doesn't need to be a disability that's visible. It doesn't, all you need to provide is how they could accommodate you and in what ways. So you don't need a medical note. I strongly recommend you identify when you have the opportunity to, and to reach out to whoever's listed on a poster, for example, or checking when you're self-identifying. I don't know if that answers the question. I don't know if any of you guys have anything to add.
I don't think I have anything to add. Thanks.
I think Zainab, you did a fantastic job. Thank you so much. We have a question here regarding the FSWEP program. Once I am in FSWEP and have worked already, when my work contract ends, do I need to re-register in FSWEP? Or do I have to update or check something to make sure that I'm still actively ready for hiring?
I can go ahead and just jump in there because it's one of my favorite things to talk about, which is open communication with your manager and networking. So once you are a student with the Government of Canada, you have a lot of opportunities to find student positions because you just need to be rehired into a student position. We mentioned inventories. So you can go ahead and have a conversation with your supervisor and, add your name to those inventories to increase your chances of getting other student opportunities in other fields or, other departments if that's something that you're looking for. The second thing is your conversation with your supervisor or your hiring manager. They need to understand that you want to continue working as a student. They won't necessarily automatically renew your contract. They need to know that you are, you want to continue as a student, that you're excited to continue, that this is something that you're looking for in terms of growing your career. So to support your career development. And one of the biggest recommendations we have to students is when you start a student contract, have a conversation with your hiring manager and develop a work plan. It's the best way for them to know if you're looking to be rehired, if you're looking for a student bridging opportunity, so that they are prepared to support you in your career development. There are chances that maybe they don't have a student bridging opportunity available for you, or they're not capable of rehiring you for another contract term. So what that means is that you will have to do your networking, but now you have your supervisor or hiring manager that can also support you and try to help you find another position. So there's so many opportunities that are out there. I encourage you to visit our GC Students Wiki page. It has all the resources there on what to do and how to network if you are currently a student and looking for another student opportunity. Please do go visit that and apply your name to inventories if that's something that you're looking to find, which is opportunities in other departments or other areas.
Thank you, Priyanka. Zainab?
I'll just add, it's a little bit repetitive as to what Priyanka said, but I sometimes tell students that hiring managers are not mind readers. And even like she said, even if that your specific supervisor or hiring manager doesn't have an opportunity, they've probably been there for a very long time and they have their own contacts. And they sometimes even send us recommendations or send us emails telling us that such a wonderful student and I'd like to help him find. So don't hesitate, even if you know for sure that the hiring manager doesn't have another position or even the budget or etc. Please have open conversations. It's honestly the best way to go about it.
Thank you so much. Staying on the topic of further student opportunities, we have a question here that is a bit loaded, but I'll try to give it a go. I've heard that because of the recession, a lot of student contracts have been not renewed this year. Is this a general tendency within the government right now? How does recessions influence the hiring capability of governments? All right, so there are multiple things we need to discuss here. The economy, history of the public service, and a lot of different factors, right? But remember that the government of Canada Public Service is the support team to implement the mandate of the elected governments. So like we have the minister, the prime minister, and they have mandates, right, on which they were elected on. And the role of the public service is to implement these new services, these policy initiatives, right? So this is how we get jobs in the government, is to fulfill these roles. Now, it always depends from one government to another. And this is really not to get political, because the public service is not, but it depends. Sometimes the public service shrinks, sometimes it expands. For example, we've seen it with the COVID-19 pandemic. Because of added pressures, we've had to hire a lot more people. Now, it's impossible for us to say whether, because of the potential upcoming recession, whether the government, the workforce will shrink or will expand. I mean, there are studies done regarding this across the country and across the world regarding how different governments in different countries are managing this, but really this is impossible to predict. Now, how do you, as a student, manage this uncertainty, right? Especially since we're functioning by contracts. Well, you network. You find a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. And that's what I've been doing. So as a student, I believe this is everybody's case, where we try to have contingency plans. And the best way to go about it when you're a student and trying to find a career in the public service is to network, expand your networks, find hiring managers. For example, I would add myself into these Facebook groups. I would also make sure that my ASVAB application is up to date with my latest skills that I learned. I would have this conversation with my managers regarding a possible extension, if not possible in this immediate team. Is there any other teams that is available? So really, you try to build a contingency plan. And I hope this answers the question, but really, planning for recessions is just like how you would plan for any rainy day in your personal life or in your professional life. Zainab?
Thanks. The only thing I wanted to add, that what I've noticed, this is not official or anything, but I've seen it being somewhat like of a shift in budget. More like, for example, when it comes to students with disabilities, or all the programs that I spoke about, the government has like a whole initiative to by 2025 to hire 5,000 students. So you see that there's a lot of effort going into that. So like Carl was saying, maybe noticing what the new trends are, where the new like initiatives are. So instead of maybe not focusing on the where there's maybe less budget, but I think it's more of a shift from one area to another. So like Carl said, when you're branching out and networking, you'll maybe hear of different maybe areas that are interesting, or that you would like to you're interested in.
Absolutely, that is so true. And I mean, the workforce in itself and the way it is built changes from one year to another, right? Sometimes we need more of the IT group, sometimes we need more of the AS group. So it always changes depending on government priorities as well. Moving on to another question, perhaps staying with you, Zainab. What are some departments hiring that are not in the NCR? Any departments that are hiring outside of the National Capital Region?
I would say yes, all the time. I'm not sure. Yes, absolutely. And what else did I wanted to say? Don't limit yourself as well by location, because of the virtual, like some positions are a little more flexible in regards to like virtual locations and yeah, all over Canada. The jobs really are available everywhere.
Excellent. Thank you, Priyanka.
Just wanted to add that if you are looking for opportunities that are not in the National Capital Region on jobs.gc.ca, you'll have the opportunity to, I think, filter by location. So if you're looking for a job in a specific location, you can filter by location and it'll pop up all the jobs for you within that specific region. So not to worry, there's always jobs available. On jobs.gc.ca, you'll see that there's many locations, not just the NCR.
Excellent. Thank you, both of you. A question regarding to self-declaration. Would you be able to link the FSWEP separate form for self-declaration as Indigenous and or disabled students? Are there specific links to this, or is it part of the FSWEP application? Could you just remind us how it works?
So I think there's the self-declaration that you use when you're applying to FSWEP or a specific job opportunity. But I don't know if they were referring to once you're hired through FSWEP and you'd like to be part of the two ICO and DUSD. That's a separate form, and I don't know if you had the link, Carl, or else I can send it to you. It's a separate form, separate link. So there's self-identifying, and then there's a separate form once you're hired through FSWEP to be part of the other student programs that are targeted for those two groups.
Excellent.
It's a little more clear.
Well, if you can send those links to
Yes.
us, and we'll make sure to share those after the meeting. Thank you so much. Another question, maybe for you, Priyanka, as a FSWEP student, would you recommend applying to be a casual employee? That's a tricky question.
It's a good question because sometimes that's something that you hear is that oftentimes before you get bridged in, you'll be offered a casual contract just as a period in between your bridging opportunity and from the end of your student contract. So keeping in mind that as a casual employee, you're still not on your way to become, you're not going to be considered an employee of the Government of Canada. You're still going to be considered a worker of the Government of Canada. It is a 90-day contract, and it's not a bad opportunity. So what I'm trying to say here is that if you are getting an opportunity to become a casual employee, and it's something that's going to help with your career development, you absolutely should consider taking an opportunity like that. If you're trying to find your way into the federal public service, we talked about two ways of getting in, which is through a determinate contract or an indeterminate contract. That is your only way of becoming an employee of the government and to have the benefits of moving around through deployments, get opportunities like acting and all of those things that we discussed. I do want to speak on an experience that actually myself and Audrey-Anne relate to. We started as FSWEP employees and eventually we graduated from our bachelor degrees. But at that time, we no longer met the requirements of the FSWEP program because we were no longer returning as full-time employees. And that's when we networked and tried to figure out how do we become indeterminate employees, get a job that's internal to, how do I become a public servant, basically. So both of us landed the opportunities to have student bridging. In that time, there's a lot of things that need to be fulfilled in order to be justified for a student bridging opportunity. They're looking for your completion of school. So you need to have your degree to prove that you received your degree. So there's that. There's a lot of justification required on if you meet the essential qualifications, if you meet the merit criteria, all of those things need to be justified. So what happened was, as soon as I graduated, of course, the day I graduated, I couldn't prove that I actually completed my degree. I had to wait a little bit to actually get my degree and then show them that I received it. So because there was going to be that period of time where they couldn't actually justify right away that I was going to get this student bridging opportunity, they offered me a 90-day casual contract. And within that time, I received all the information I needed. They were able to provide justification, fill out all the paperwork, complete the whole thing. And I was fortunate enough to get my student bridging opportunity within those 90 days. That's not to say that it's guaranteed that it's 3 months and you'll have it. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it takes shorter. It really depends on the situation and what's going on with and what's required for that position. So in a nutshell, to answer that question, if you're getting an opportunity that's helpful for your career and it's something that you're going to develop skills in and you'll continue networking and so on, I would never turn down an opportunity that's going to help you grow and develop, and just encourage you to do other things. So definitely not a hard no, definitely something to consider. Audrey-Anne, is there something you would like to add on that?
Yes, I just wanted to add that as a student, I personally think it is better for you to, especially if you meet the eligibility criteria for FSWAP, let's say, to find an FSWAP job, because you'll be eligible for benefits and for pension. And if you are under a casual contract, you won't be eligible. Like casual workers do not have access to insurance, all the benefits and the pension. So that's something else to be aware of.
Thank you both of you for this answer. We have a question here that I will start us with, and you guys are welcome to jump in. How could a student who has no connections in the government right now can grow their network and meet government representatives, employees, and managers? My tool of choice to do that is LinkedIn. I would encourage you to, if LinkedIn is your thing, add us on LinkedIn right now, all 4 of us. Alexa, Priyanka, myself, and Audrey-Anne, we're all active on LinkedIn as part of managing our GC Students Network. And then you can start from there. But you can also attend networking events, and we have one after this event online on Zoom. I'll invite you to join in. And oftentimes it's just through word of mouth. So if you know one person, then that one person knows another person, and it just exponentially grows. So start small. That's how I started, right? I didn't know anybody, but I knew I wanted to be in the public service one day. So I started with FSWAP, and then I knew that I had a professor in CEGEP that was working for the government. So I asked him about the opportunities, and told me about FSWAP, and that's how I got my first FSWAP position. Then I continued to network, getting involved with the Federal Youth Network, with GC Students Network, and then I had another FSWAP opportunity, and then the rest is history, right? So don't get discouraged, just start small and use social media, leverage social medias to build those connections as well. It doesn't have to be in person, it can also be online. Priyanka,
I just want to jump in and say that if you have career fairs at your school, oftentimes you'll see booths set up there for representatives in the government from different departments. A lot of the time, the Public Service Commission will be there. You'll see other departments there, representing their opportunities. And that is one way to make a face-to-face connection with somebody. If you're not able to connect with somebody through social media because you've never been to a networking event, it's a great way to start initially. But I love what you shared, Carl, about approaching your professor, because you never know. There's a lot of people out there that work for the government and can, be the beginning of your community and your network. Also, signing up for our newsletter and the Facebook group, those are all opportunities to network. Following us on LinkedIn, on Twitter, we're going to share opportunities where you can network, and that's a good place to connect with people that are maybe in the same boat as you. So just keeping that in mind, that we do have the social media platforms available to you so that you can start building your network, because we do want to be mindful that there's some people on this call who have not yet worked for the government and are looking to pursue that. So it's a great way to start by staying connected if social media is a platform that you use.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Priyanka. I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. First of which would be, when to start to contact for student bridging is good. Half year before graduation, is there something I can do to increase the success possibility of bridging in?
Okay, so the answer to that question is if you're currently a student and interested in a student bridging opportunity, mention it right now. The reason I say that is because in your work plan, when you talk about your career and what you want to do, your supervisor, your hiring manager, or maybe even your colleagues are there to support you and to help you grow. If they're not aware that you want a student bridging opportunity, they're not going to know that they should be looking out for a position that's available that they might be able to bridge you into. And knowledge is really power. So if they know that, they might be able to keep that in mind throughout the years as you are a student, to know that, okay, after they graduate, they want an opportunity to work in the government. This is how we can support them. So making sure you have that work plan with your current supervisor or hiring manager and making it extremely clear that you're looking for student bridging opportunities is beneficial to do that immediately. It's worse if you wait a longer period of time to talk about it, just because it takes time to first of all, figure out if there's even a position for you to be bridged into. Second of all, getting through all the steps required to initiate a student bridging. So it takes time. You want to make sure they have the most amount of time possible. And if anything, even if this is your first contract, having that open conversation can help them prepare to see if they're able to provide you future contracts and if that leads into an opportunity for student bridging. And that's how that worked for me. I was able to inform my manager early on when I started that I wanted to continue, I wanted to grow, and I wanted to learn. I was able to get rehired for multiple contracts and then eventually offered a student bridging because that was within my career plan. That was within my work plan that I had developed with my manager. So start now, have that conversation today if you haven't already.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. And on those wonderful words, this is what concludes our event for today. On behalf of the GC Students Network and the Federal Youth Network, I wish to thank you all for your participation in today's event. Thank you, Zainab, Audrey-Anne, Priyanka, and Alexa for contributing to this event. I appreciate it a lot. I'm really excited to see you at other events. Speaking of which, we also have our networking event online, so stay with us. The invite is in your email as well. So I'm looking forward to connecting with all of you on a personal basis. Visit us on social media and stay in the loop as up to the upcoming events that we have going on over the spring and the summer as well. I hope you have a wonderful day and see you soon.